Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, a podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. This week, I'm joined by Andy McHugh. Hi, Andy. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me on. It's always a privilege to be where other teachers are and to be discussing things that can hopefully make an impact.
I think some of our listeners may already know of you from your previous work, but I think it's definitely worth, before we get into the main topic of this episode, sort of going exploring a bit about where you are and how you got here today.
Yeah, so I've been teaching for about 20 years. I run an RE department up in County Durham, but really where people will know me from on here would be from writing articles and being the editor of HWRK Magazine since about 2020, 2021. I took on that role. And really, that's really where teacher writers began. I suppose if yeah, it really began out of my work as an editor, where people were pitching to me lots of ideas for articles and to maybe run series of articles and books. And most people had ideas, but they didn't really know how to go about setting them up as something that was publishable or to pitch them to a particular audience that they might have had in mind. So my job really over the last few years was to give advice, get those ideas published where they were suitable, and from that I just decided, well, we could build a service around this idea of serving teachers who want to have that impact beyond the classroom, with their wider communities, with the wider teaching community, and to support them on that journey because writing is it's what we do naturally as teachers. A lot of the time we are natural communicators. And, most days we're writing something, whether it's resources, reports, whether we're having those conversations with home about different things, whether we're writing strategy documents. And a lot of it seems to just get stuck at school or stuck in the office. And it doesn't really go beyond there when it could have a huge impact beyond our own organizations and our own, small networks. So that's really what I want to do to create a service that helps those ideas break from the walls that they're sort of contained by in order to work more collaboratively across the profession, help each other out.
What then is teacher writers? What's the premise of it then?
So the idea is that teachers who want to write don't always know how to go about it. And a lot of their ideas, a lot of teachers' ideas are essentially half formed in in their own heads. They've had a bit of an experience of something, or they've had a go at working on something and they've seen some success and they want to share that idea, but they don't necessarily know how to go about putting it into a structured form. So what teacher writers is there to do is to help teachers to build on that experience and to build on that kernel of an idea, flesh it out, and so that those teachers can create something that is more impactful, that really has a lot more consideration given to it, so that they're not just ideas that you can just throw out in a staff meeting, but there's some real depth underpinning them, and so that we can trust those ideas and run with them because we know that they work.
Lots to unpick there. I mean, the idea of depth really interesting because a lot of edu books at the moment are closer to pamphlet than they are to tome
Mm-hmm.
in terms of length. What sort of have you guys got like an average we're aiming for, say, 50,000 words within a book, or is it whatever
It
happens to be on the
it
desk at that
really
time?
Yeah, it really does depend. We've got so many authors working on things at the moment. We're a relatively new company, having begun just at the beginning of 2024. So a lot of the work that we've been doing is for books that are about to come out or will be out next year. And they're really wide ranging. I mean, we've got books that are sort of slim volumes at about 20,000 words, quick tips on how to do X or how to implement something. We've got much more in-depth things on how to lead a department or how to implement particular whole school strategies, whether it's literacy, send, pastoral things. Next month, we've got a fantastic book coming out for DSLs who, there's that landscape is constantly changing. So that book itself is sort of around about 50,000 words, and that's much more in depth. But again, it's aimed to be a practical strategy guide rather than a really sort of dense research heavy book, which there's a place for those, and I've read a ton of them, and I will continue to read a ton of them because they're a real treasure trove of information, but they're not always immediately practical in your own life. What you might need is, oh, I've got a difficult conversation to have tomorrow. How can I approach it? What questions should I ask? What steps should I make sure are in place so that that goes well? And really, what I want to do is to create a set of books that is immediately practical to the person picking them up so they can pick it up on a Monday and use it on a Tuesday. And that's really what I'm aiming for the books that are coming out this year.
50,000 words on being designated safeguarding lead. I mean, can you send me a copy of that and the person's email address?
Absolutely,
I need to
absolutely.
speak to the person who has written 50,000 words on that role because that will be immensely useful for
It's
so many people.
honestly, I mean, as the editor of the book, I've read that book so many times. Um, just just to get my head around the ideas. I'm not a safeguarding lead myself, despite having worked in schools for a long time. And but I've come across so many of the ideas in there, but I've not necessarily considered the different ways that those problems could have been approached or the complexities behind things that I thought, oh, that's, there's a simple fix for that. We just need to do X. And actually, when you look into it, there's 1,000 cogs spinning in the background that, unless you're in that scenario, you don't really, well, you don't even know about them, let alone you're able to think about them. And so, yeah, Hannah Carter is definitely the go-to authority on this at the moment. She's, in fact, I've got her book here. You can't see it there. There we go. The Honest Head Teacher. It's not really coming up. I'll send you a link to it. She wrote that one a few months ago on her experiences of being a head teacher, and again, a practical guide. If you're new to headship, you read that book and you immediately go, right, I know what I need to do in the first 100 days of me being in the role. I know what I need to focus on. This is how I approach staffing, how I approach observations, how I approach workload, all of the different sort of facets of being a head teacher that are going to really consume your life in those first few months. Hannah's really distilled it down into something that really, if you don't read that book and you're new to the job, you're running at a loss there. You need to get stuck into it so that you can hit the ground running. It's a really practical, strategic guidebook, really, apart from anything else.
I think there's definitely a place for those kinds of books. I mean, some of the things I've seen in the past are like often you'll find old books in your cupboard in school, and it'll be the here's my opinion on X topic, and someone hasn't done their due diligence, and actually the advice in it is really bad.
Yeah.
What sort of safeguards do you have in place? Like I'm assuming your own experience of working in school is going to be number one, but like what safeguards do you have in place to make sure that actually they're not giving advice where people end up triple marking and doing those kind of rubbish things? I'm not saying they would, but
Yeah.
you almost
Well, I
need
mean,
to.
one of the things that I was really keen to do when I set up the company was to make sure that there's not just the writer who's involved in the production of the book, that, once this book is being created, it's then sent out and it's checked. And there's lots of people who vet it for consistency, who vet it for, consistency of experience. Is this what's happening in their schools too? And you'll see when you pick up a copy, there's, the front of the book is littered with comments from lots of people who have spent time in that role, whether they are head teachers, DSLs, department heads, trust leads, whatever it is. It's obviously depending on the book, because what we want is we want this book to be representative of enough people so that, well, first of all, so that enough people want to buy it. That's always a bonus, but also that it needs to be useful. There's no point in writing a book and for that book to not have an impact, and we want it to have a positive impact and a sustainable one. What we want is for someone to pick up a book, read it, for it to have a positive impact, and for them to want to pick up the next book and the book after that because they trust it. We've built in that trustworthiness over time, that people know that when they pick up a teacher writer's book, it's going to be useful. It's going to help them. It's going to make their lives simpler. They can make better decisions quicker and make fewer sort of avoidable errors, I think we would say.
For lots of schools, the provision of challenge and depth in primary mathematics is always a burning question, something that's always on teachers' minds, always on subject leaders' minds. And it's something that I'm going to explore in a series of workshops around the UK, starting with 3 in October and November. So in London, we're going to be in Camden on the 13th of October. We're going to be in Coventry on the 22nd of October. And then on the 7th of November, we're going to be in Oldham in the Greater Manchester area, exploring challenge and depth in primary mathematics, how we can take children from noticing patterns to mathematical proof, everything in between, so that our questioning, our task design are set up in such a way that our students are really thinking deeply about the mathematics that they encounter. And so we can go deeper without having to accelerate children on unnecessarily. I'll make sure there's a link in the description, but tickets are on sale now for all three of those dates, and they're the first three in a tour that's likely to go on across 2026 as well. So without further ado, back to the episode. It sounds like you guys are doing a whole lot more than a traditional publisher might do. Does, and it feels like it's mission driven as opposed to bottom line driven, because
Yeah.
there really isn't any way to take more from the cut that a teacher receives when they write a book. So like,
Yeah.
what was your thinking behind this whole thing, and how, the interaction between teacher and publisher? Like, what were you thinking?
Well, I mean, I'd spoken to quite a few writers who'd worked with me on articles over the last few years, and a number of them had written books, and they'd had really mixed experiences of working with different publishers. There's many good publishers out there, and there's many teachers who go back to the same publisher time and time again because they have had that good experience, but it is a mixed bag. And part of it is down to the publisher perhaps not really appreciating the lives of teachers and understanding that we have a very small amount of time in which we can really get into a regular writing routine, which is sometimes what you need to get something out there that's of sufficient depth and quality. There's also the rhythm of the school year. There's times when we're extremely busy and times when we've got a bit more free time, and that sometimes works with publishing cycles of sort of generic publishers, but sometimes it doesn't, and it doesn't match up well. And when it doesn't match up well, those books end up either not being produced to the best quality or not being produced at all. And the teachers have had also a bit of a raw deal with regard to commissions, the payments from the sales of the book, which the industry standards between sort of 8 and 15%, which is understandable if you've got lots of overheads as a company. But with us being quite a lightweight, nimble company, we don't have those overheads, so we can offer teachers more than the industry standard, which is it's I think it's fair. Teachers are the ones generating these ideas. They're putting the hours and hours and hours writing the books. And yes, we've got the costs to incur to publish them, but it's the teacher who should really see a huge benefit from that. We need to keep the lights on and make a little bit of a profit, but it's the teachers who we want to benefit from this process.
I mean, that's amazing, because especially right now, because Lucy Crane's first book, Cleverlands, was published through this sort of publishing house where it was 50-50.
Wow.
But they've since closed down,
Yeah.
which meaning that option is not necessarily there for teachers.
I'm
So,
guessing they ran out of money with those sorts of margins. Very generous of them.
well, I mean, Cleverlands was a long time ago, and it's only
Yeah.
just closed down. Like, I mean, I went on their website for something the other day, and it was maybe a month ago where they had ceased trading or something. So it may have been other things, but it was very, very generous and way above what
Yeah,
you would
well,
expect.
the numbers I'm getting from most people are sort of hovering around about 10-12%, which, you know, it's okay. It's better than nothing. Um, we think publishers can do better. That's really where we're at, sort of positioned at the moment. We'll see where that goes.
And is your plan to always be sort of small and nimble? and sort of yeah, on like not being able to react quickly in the moment rather than becoming a large publishing
I
house.
think there's a huge benefit to doing it that way. I can't predict the future. If I'm not gonna rule out huge success in the future. That would be, a nightmare, wouldn't it? Becoming the next Bill Gates of the publishing world. But that's not my intention. But what I want to do is I want to get teachers' voices out there. I want them to be represented on DFA advisory boards, on panels. I want them to be the ones leading the charge for CPD in given areas, rather than, what seems at times to be sort of a top-down approach from ministers and ex-teachers and ex-school leaders. And, they've got a lot of wisdom, a lot of experience, but they're not necessarily in the classroom at the time where education is changing, children's experiences are changing, families are changing, and so we need relevant voices of today in order to, get those voices showcased. We need to have the ability to, turn around a book quickly. We need to have the ability to get those voices out there while they're still relevant, so that we can make an impact now and not in, say, 2 years' time. Which again, it's another bugbear that some of the authors have had, is that they've had this manuscript written, ready. They've sent it off to the publisher. The publisher said, "Yep, that's brilliant. We'll commission it. We'll give you money for this. It'll be ready in 2028." By which point the moment's passed, the excitement's fizzled out a little bit, and really there's no reason why we can't get that out earlier, where possible. We can typically turn around a book in just a few months rather than having to wait 18 months to 24 months, which is seems to be quite standard amongst quite a few of the publishers out there. Not all of them, but quite a few of them.
That certainly sounds really beneficial because, like you said, 18 months is it's a big cycle.
A
You could have
long
a
time
couple
in
of
teaching. I mean, think about all the things you've done in the last 18 months. It's, your life will be different now to what it was 18 months ago, and it'll be different again in 18 months' time. You might not be in that role anymore. You might have a different approach because of family, because of government policy. There might be different people in charge of the country, with the DFE taking things in a completely new direction. At which point, your thoughts from 18 months ago don't really count as much as thoughts today. So that's why we want to be able to, stay as nimble as possible for as long as possible, because the benefit to that is it's not just a benefit to us, it's a benefit to the profession.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the further I get from the classroom, the more I try to bring in people who are actually in the classroom before I make wild statements about how appropriate things are or what life's like in the classroom. Because I think there's there's a sense that things are just getting tougher and tougher in schools, and we'll see how the white paper dropping on SEND sort of changes
Yeah.
that. But I certainly I can speak to my experience in the past, and I can speak to mathematics.
Hmm.
But I'm not going. I have no intention of speaking for classroom teachers at the moment because it must be a totally different world and really intense sort of
Yeah.
situation.
And I think one of the other things as well is there's a relatively small number of voices who are speaking about education, and as broad as your experience or my experience can be, it's just our experience. And what we need is as many teachers as possible writing as often as possible with fresh perspectives, with new contexts, so that we can all benefit from that, because we're going to have new students coming into our classrooms every single year, and every single cohort that comes in has had a slightly different, you know, upbringing, whether that's because of the socio-economic context of the country, whether it's their past experience during the pandemic. Um, you know, the ones that the ones that are coming through into secondary school now, they've had a very, very different experience. And I can speak from my own children's experience. They're coming into secondary schools now with very different sort of standards of literacy, oracy, numeracy, just as on a basic level. But the social skills, they're not the same as they were 5 years ago, and partly that's as a result of more use of devices, at home. There's more sort of devices per child now as compared to what they used to be. And we're starting to see that students don't really have those communication skills in the ways that they did. How you deal with that today is different to how you would have dealt with that 3 years ago. It was a different issue then. There were different levels of support. There were different numbers of students coming through with that sort of problem to solve. So we need today's teachers with today's solutions out there published, because books of 5 years ago, they might not have stood the test of time in such a in such a changing time as we have at the moment.
I want our teachers, our listeners, to write as much as possible. I think we need the more teachers we have writing, the better. Because I know there are a lot of edgy books, but I think we need to be sharing that experience. We need to be documenting that and sharing best practice. Like, if someone's listening and they're reticent, maybe if we outline what the flow map of emailing Andy to finished book, what would that flow map look like for, let's say, our least experienced author, but a reasonably experienced teacher?
Okay, so let's take someone who, let's say they're an English teacher or a history teacher or a literacy leader, whatever their specialism is. They will typically want to write about their specialism. If we just take non-fiction, for example, we do have fiction writers as well. I can maybe get onto that later. Um, they will all they need to do is to keep it simple to begin with. Just send me an email. Just andy@teacherwriters.com and say hi. Just say hi. My name's Sam. I'm interested in writing a book or an article on. Then give me the topic. It could be Henry VIII. It could be Shakespeare. It could be Pythagoras' theorem for 7-year-olds. Whatever it is, and all they have to do is just introduce themselves and the idea. I'll then get back to them. We'll organise, some time for a chat, and we can go through it on the phone or over Zoom, and sort of hammer out that idea of what it would look like, whether it's best suited to an article, a series of articles, a book. Maybe it would be better suited to an educational resource. Maybe it would be better suited to a website with some kind of tool on it that schools can use. And we'll sort of work out between us what that could look like, and then we'll make a sort of a rough plan of when that could, when we could have that produced by as a prototype or as a first draft of a manuscript. And once we've got that, we can then look at the editing process. And what we do, teacher writers, we have a fantastic team of editors who work with us. Many of them are also ex-teachers or people who've worked on educational materials before, for different educational publishing companies. And we'll then put together a schedule where we can say, right, well, it's January now. By March, we'll have this all whipped into shape. We'll have our designer create a front cover for the book. We'll have our typesetter make sure it's formatted for paperback and for the ebook, and it'll be on sale on Amazon by, the 18th of March or whatever the time scale would be. And it's relatively quick because we don't have 1,000 different moving parts. We want to get that teacher's work out as quickly as possible, so we tend not to take on lots of projects simultaneously. We want to work with that one teacher or with one or two or three teachers at a time and get their work done and done brilliantly and get out there as quickly as possible. Alongside that, we've then got the supplementary things that we offer as well, like the content marketing. So it might be that that teacher wants to write a book on, say, literacy. Well, in order to sell that book, they're going to have to be a known and trusted author. So we'll arrange for them to either create a Substack or to write a blog on their website. It might be that they want a website built, so we'll quickly knock up a website for them where they can publish their ideas. It might be that they want to be more broadly known quite quickly, so we can set them up with some articles with some educational magazines, whether it's Homework or SecEd or whoever, and they can get their work out there and in front of the right sort of people, the kind of people who would typically buy those books, and get them set up on podcasts as well. So I'll send a few guests your way over the next few months, if they're suited to your audience as well. And yeah, to really, so to get the ball rolling very quickly, so that once that book is out there, lots of people know about it. It's the right sort of people, and we can have that impact quickly.
I mean, it sounds amazing because essentially you're supporting them the whole way through, and it's
Yeah,
this low pressure, high sort of value proposition that you've got going on. So I really
yeah.
hope there is someone listening who thinks actually I'm going to be a little bit braver and put myself forward. And you said you were listening to some episodes as prep to sort of get into the zone. There's an episode with someone from the Northeast called Samantha Patterson,
Okay.
and she's been leading a really interesting project across three schools in Durham. And I think it would make an interesting story. I think
Right.
it'd be nonfiction, but the lessons learned from supporting these three schools, because I think one's a three form, one's a half form, and everything in between these three
Wow.
slash four schools. And yeah, so I think if you want to go back and listen to her episode, she might.
Yeah, no, will do. That sounds right up my street, actually.
I
Um,
can. I can only do so much to try and push her in your direction, but we'll see.
Well, yeah, I mean, what we want is we just want teachers to have that little bit of bravery, that little bit of courage to say, you know what, I think this could be more than just, an idea at the end of an agenda. It could be more than just a little cursory note at the end of a CPD session. It could be an article, it could be a series, it could be a book. I could create some kind of audiovisual content out of it. It could, we've got teachers working on all sorts of things. We've got teachers working on question banks for education software companies. We've got teachers working on novels and screenplays, educational resources for everything from early years all the way up to sixth form colleges and everything in between. And some of it is teacher facing, some of it is student facing. Some of them are revision guides for students rather than, books for teachers. And some of them are fiction. We've got a couple of teachers working on their own fiction novels. We've got someone working on a children's book. We've got someone else working on a poetry book, and it's all teachers who want to get their writing out there. And so, teacher writers, as much as we started out as a service for teachers writing for teachers, it's broadened out a little more to just serve teachers who want to write. And I think that's really the key thing. Lots of teachers want to write. They don't necessarily know how to go about starting it, and it is more straightforward than it seems. It's just having someone to just give you a little bit of a nudge in the right direction and just to catch you when you begin to fall, to support you along that journey. And that's what we're there for. We're there to support those people who want to get their words out there so that they can, have that make that difference to someone, whether it's, informative or whether it's just pure entertainment.
So I mean, that I think that fiction and poetry will be really interesting to a lot of teachers, because I can imagine that. And I suppose my question would be: does the writing have to fall within the teacher's standards? Like, for instance, if someone wanted to be like a transgressive writer, like Irvine Welsh, it's not really compatible with the role of
It's
teacher. Would,
Yeah, I
would,
mean
where
it's
where would you fall on that kind of decision
it's a
making? I'm not
tricky
saying
one.
that I know
I'll
anybody who
I'll
does
be
that.
honest, it's not something that I've had to approach so far. Cue the thousand pictures of, questionable novels coming my way. I don't know. It's one of those things where, obviously we've got to balance, our brand as much as anything with and what we'd be happy to, have our name put to. Um, that can make it quite tricky, because obviously we've got, teachers who are teaching, say, politics or PSHE, and they might have a particular bias, for or against a particular agenda, whether it's, towards or against a political party or the decisions of the government, or, it could be a minority rights issue. And we've got to tread very carefully to make sure that what we're allowing to be published is fair and ought to be out there as part of the public debate. And not everything will be to everybody's tastes, but at least what is out there would be a trustworthy, reasonable expression of an idea. And that's really all any publisher can hope to do, I think, because you've got to balance that freedom of creativity, that freedom of expression, um, and that's not always something that everybody will always agree on. Most of our materials do happen to be sort of pretty standard non-fiction teaching related materials, so they are quite sort of middle of the road in their nature. Um, but watch this space. We'll see where we go.
Nobody's writing the next train spotting.
Not yet, not yet. Give it time. Ask me again in July.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward. I mean, I definitely read that. Um, so, I mean, that sounds fantastic. I mean, I'm thinking here, like, okay, maybe there's a teacher podcasters because I do want lots of teachers to podcast as well because I think
Yeah.
there's a certain freedom that if the written word isn't for you, then the spoken word may be a little bit more manageable kind of thing. I don't know, but maybe that's something to come back to in
I think
another
so. I mean,
time.
I've been asked quite a few times, "Oh, are you going to create a podcast around this, or are you going to create a podcast on teaching and learning and have people on it, in the same sort of vein as what you're doing at the moment?" And it's like it is with anything. It's the time element. There's so many hours in the day. I'm already busy, and I want to do justice to what I'm doing right now. And I wouldn't want to spread myself too thinly. But if a teacher approached me and said, I want to create a podcast, well, I have people in our editorial team who have produced podcasts and who do a fantastic job in supporting a teacher to create their own. And we could help them create the content for that. We can help them to design scripts for, to top and tail the broadcast, to help them outline, what an interview could or might look like for different things that they might want to approach in the podcast. So it's a constantly evolving sort of editorial picture behind the scenes here, because we do get such a diversity of ideas because the profession is hugely diverse in terms of the ideas that people bring in. There's thousands and thousands of teachers, each with their own perspective and their own tastes, and we want to be able to serve as many of those people as possible. They just need to have that initial sort of nudge in the right direction sometimes, just to get going. But lots of people are taking us up on it now, which is great.
So I think we've covered lots, and I think it sounds really, really exciting. Let's just reiterate the best way to get in touch is to email you. What's that email again, Andy?
So my email is andy@teacherwriters.com. And all you need to do is just to send that email, just say, "Hi, Andy, I've got this idea for a book on history. Can we schedule a time to go through it and have a chat?" And that's all you need to do. That's that first point of contact. Just set that up, introduce yourself, and we'll take it from there. Teacher Writers is there to guide you from the inception of your idea all the way through to publication. We walk you through every step of the process so that none of it has to be unknown, and it can all be, where they're all, at all points to hold your hand through that process.
And obviously, if it's fiction, the more salacious, the better.
Absolutely,
Just
absolutely. We're looking for, we're looking for that, spot on the news, horrified faces in the background.
oh, yeah, I can just imagine the headlines. Oh, it's been fantastic chatting with you. Like I said, do send me authors my way, and I'll send you my address so you can
Absolutely.
send me copies of the books because I love reading. I read a lot, and it sounds like this is right up my street. So fingers crossed, listeners are also thinking, actually, I'm gonna take the leap, and I'm gonna start writing because this sounds like a really attractive and supportive way to get involved. So all I have to do is say thank you very much for joining me.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. I've loved chatting to you about it. And to any listeners thinking of writing a book, do get in touch. We are dying to hear from you. We can't wait to hear about your ideas, and we'd love to work with you.
And to everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening.